At the end of the 19th century, the world was changing faster than ever before. Factories roared across Europe. Steel railways cut through landscapes. Steamships crossed oceans in weeks instead of months. Rifles fired faster. Cannons struck harder. Empires expanded further. For Europe, progress meant power. For Africa, it meant invasion. By the 1880s, European nations no longer saw Africa as distant lands of trade and exploration. They saw it as territory to be owned, divided, and controlled. This period would become known as the Scramble for Africa. Within just a few decades, nearly the entire African continent was swallowed by foreign empires. Kingdoms that had existed for centuries collapsed. Ancient political systems were erased. Millions were forced into colonial rule. But in this storm of conquest, one ancient African civilization stood apart. One empire refused to disappear: Ethiopia. Long before European colonization, Africa was not a dark, empty continent waiting to be discovered. It was home to advanced kingdoms, complex political systems, and powerful armies. West Africa had the empires of Mali and Songhai. Southern Africa had Great Zimbabwe. North Africa had ancient states tied to Mediterranean civilization. And in the Horn of Africa stood Ethiopia, one of the oldest continuous civilizations on Earth. Ethiopia was not new, it was ancient. Its kings traced their lineage back thousands of years to the legendary union of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Christianity had reached Ethiopia in the 4th century, making it one of the earliest Christian states in the world. While Europe passed through the Dark Ages, Ethiopia maintained literacy, governance, and international diplomacy. By the 19th century, Ethiopia was not a tribe, it was an empire. It had borders, it had a crown, it had laws, and most importantly, it had an army. European powers often justified colonization by claiming Africans were disorganized, primitive, and incapable of self-rule. By the late 19th century, Italy was a nation searching for identity. Unlike Britain or France, Italy had unified only recently in 1861. Its leaders felt surrounded by older, stronger empires. They believed that without colonies, Italy would never be respected as a great power. In Europe, empire meant status, and Italy wanted status. Italian politicians, generals, and newspapers spoke openly of the need for colonies. Africa, they believed, was the answer. Across the Mediterranean and the Red Sea lay lands that European powers had already begun to divide. France was in North Africa. Britain controlled Egypt and the Suez Canal. Italy looked for a foothold of its own. Its eyes turned toward the Red Sea coast. In the 1860s and 1870s, Italian companies began purchasing small ports along the African shoreline. At first, these were presented as commercial ventures, but commerce quickly turned into conquest. By the late 1880s, Italy had established control over a stretch of territory along the Red Sea coast. This region would later be known as Eritrea. For Italy, Eritrea was more than land, it was proof that Italy could build an empire. But Eritrea was not enough. Italian leaders believed colonies should expand inward. They believed borders were meant to grow. South of Eritrea stood Ethiopia, independent, ancient, proud. To many Italian officials, Ethiopia represented both a threat and an opportunity. A threat because its independence challenged the European belief that Africa was destined to be ruled. An opportunity because if Italy could conquer Ethiopia, it would silence critics and elevate Italy's status overnight. Italian newspapers described Ethiopia as backward and divided. Politicians claimed its people would welcome European rule. Military planners predicted an easy victory. These assumptions would prove disastrous. Ethiopia was not divided in the way Italy imagined. While regional rivalries existed, Ethiopia possessed something rare in colonized Africa, a strong central authority. And that authority was growing stronger. At the center of Ethiopia's power stood Emperor Menelik II. Menelik was no fool. He understood European arrogance, he understood European technology, and most importantly, he understood European deception. At first, Menelik attempted diplomacy. Like many African leaders, he hoped to use European rivalries to Ethiopia's advantage. He signed treaties, he exchanged letters, he welcomed foreign advisors and traders. But Italy's ambitions soon became clear. Italian forces pushed deeper into territory long claimed by Ethiopia. They built forts, they stationed troops, they tested boundaries. Each step brought Italy closer to confrontation. At the same time, Italy faced resistance from Ethiopian commanders in the north. One of the most formidable was Ras Alula and Gida. Ras Alula was a seasoned warrior. He had already defeated Egyptian forces in earlier conflicts. He understood mountain warfare, he understood logistics, and he understood how to fight Europeans. In 1887, Italian forces attempted to expand further inland. They encountered Ras Alula's army at Dogali. What followed shocked Italy. Ras Alula's forces annihilated an Italian column. Hundreds of Italian soldiers were killed. The defeat sent shockwaves through Rome. For the first time, Italy realized Ethiopia would not fall easily. But instead of retreating, Italy doubled down. Italian politicians demanded revenge. They increased troop deployments. They expanded their colonial army. They framed Ethiopia not as a sovereign empire, but as a rebellious obstacle. Meanwhile, Menelik watched carefully. He did not rush north immediately. Instead, he strengthened Ethiopia from within. He secured loyalty from regional rulers. He gathered weapons. He built alliances. Menelik understood a simple truth. A modern war could not be won with courage alone. It required rifles, artillery, supply lines, and unity. Italy, however, believed technology alone would be enough. Italian officers trusted their rifles and cannons. They underestimated Ethiopian intelligence networks. They underestimated Ethiopian numbers, and they underestimated Ethiopian motivation. By the late 1880s, the situation was tense. Italy controlled Eritrea. Ethiopia controlled the highlands. Between them lay disputed territory. Emperor Menelik II and Ethiopia's military preparation. By the early 1890s, Emperor Menelik II understood something that many rulers before him had failed to grasp. The threat facing Ethiopia was not temporary, it was existential. European empires were not trading partners seeking cooperation, they were expanding machines. And once they turned their attention toward a nation, they did not stop until it was absorbed. Menelik knew that bravery alone could not stop an empire. Ethiopia would need organization, weapons, unity, and leadership. Menelik II was born Saleh Mariam in the region of Shewa. He rose to power not through inheritance alone, but through intelligence, patience, and political skill. By the time he was crowned Emperor of Ethiopia in 1889, Menelik had already spent decades studying power. He had observed European diplomats, he had watched European armies, and he had learned from African rulers who had been defeated. Menelik's first priority was unity. Ethiopia was vast and diverse. It was composed of many regions, cultures, and leaders. If Ethiopia were divided, it would fall. Menelik understood this better than anyone. He worked tirelessly to secure the loyalty of regional rulers. Some he persuaded with diplomacy, some he bound through marriage alliances, others he brought under control through force. But by the early 1890s, Ethiopia stood more unified than it had been in generations. Regional leaders did not simply serve the empire, they believed in its survival. Menelik's second priority was modernization. European armies dominated battlefields not because they were braver, but because they were better equipped. They carried repeating rifles. They deployed artillery. They had organized logistics. Menelik set out to close this gap. He established trade relations with multiple European powers: France, Russia, Britain. He did not rely on a single source. This was deliberate. Menelik understood that dependency was a weapon. By diversifying Ethiopia's suppliers, he ensured that no one power could control him. Thousands of modern rifles were imported, artillery pieces followed, ammunition stockpiles were built. Ethiopian soldiers trained with these weapons long before war began. This was not improvisation, it was preparation. Menelik also understood geography. Ethiopia's terrain was its greatest ally: mountains, narrow passes, high plateaus. European armies were designed for open fields and clear supply routes. Menelik planned to fight on Ethiopian terms. Supply lines would stretch thin, marches would be exhausting, water and food would be scarce. Every mile inland would weaken the invader. But weapons alone were not enough. Menelik needed commanders, and Ethiopia had them. From the north came Ras Alula Engida, a veteran of multiple wars. From Tigraf came Ras Mengesha Yohannes, familiar with the very terrain Italy would have to cross. From the west came Negus Tekle Haimanot of Gojam, bringing large, disciplined forces. From the east came Ras Makonnen Walde Mikael, governor of Harar and one of Menelik's most trusted generals. From Wollo came Ras Mikel, commanding fierce and mobile troops. Each of these men ruled their own regions, each commanded loyalty, and yet, at Menelik's call, they agreed to fight as one. This unity was unprecedented. European observers believed Ethiopia would fracture under pressure. Instead, it hardened. Menelik also prepared psychologically. He understood morale. He understood symbolism. When war became inevitable, Menelik issued a nationwide proclamation. He called on all Ethiopians to defend their land, not for glory, not for conquest, but for survival. The response was overwhelming. From villages, from towns, from distant regions, men called the call. Some came with rifles, others with spears, some with shields, others with swords. They did not come for pay. They came because Ethiopia was their home. Menelik also ensured supplies. Food stockpiles were gathered, animals were prepared for transport, routes were planned. The Ethiopian army would not starve, the invader would. Italian intelligence failed to grasp the scale of this preparation. They believed Ethiopia could field only disorganized masses. They believed Ethiopian soldiers would flee under artillery fire. They believed the campaign would be short. They believed wrong. By late 1895, Ethiopia was ready. Its army was massive, its leadership was unified, its weapons were modern, and its purpose was clear. Italy would advance, and Ethiopia would meet it. But before the armies could clash, one final spark would ignite the conflict: a treaty, a mistranslation, and a declaration that Ethiopia would never accept. In the next part, we will examine the Treaty of Wuchale, the document that Italy used to claim control over Ethiopia, and the moment Emperor Menelik II drew the line that led directly to war. In the history of wars, battles are often remembered for gunfire and bloodshed. But some wars begin not on the battlefield, but on paper. The conflict between Ethiopia and Italy was one of them. At the center of this conflict stood a single document, the Treaty of Wuchale. Signed in 1889, the treaty was meant to define relations between Ethiopia and Italy. Instead, it became the spark that ignited war. When Emperor Johannes IV died in 1889, Ethiopia entered a moment of transition. Menelik of Shewa moved quickly to secure the throne. Italy saw opportunity. Italian diplomats believed they could shape the future of Ethiopia through treaties rather than force. Menelik, for his part, sought recognition. Recognition as emperor. Recognition of Ethiopia's borders. Recognition of sovereignty. Negotiations took place in the town of Wuchale. Representatives of Emperor Menelik and the Kingdom of Italy met to draft an agreement. The treaty contained multiple articles. Some addressed borders, others addressed trade. At first glance, it appeared to be a standard diplomatic agreement. But hidden within it was a fatal flaw. The treaty was written in two languages, Italian and Amharic. Article 17 was the problem. In the Italian version, Article 17 stated that Ethiopia must conduct its foreign relations through Italy. In effect, this made Ethiopia an Italian protectorate. In the Amharic version, the wording was different. It stated that Ethiopia may, if it wished, use Italy for diplomatic communication. This was optional, not mandatory. The difference between must and may was the difference between independence and submission. Menelik signed the treaty believing Ethiopia remained sovereign. Italy signed the treaty believing Ethiopia had surrendered control of its foreign policy. For a time, the contradiction remained hidden. Then, Italy revealed its intentions. Italian diplomats informed European powers that Ethiopia was now an Italian protectorate. Maps were published showing Ethiopia under Italian control. Rome celebrated a diplomatic victory. Menelik was stunned. He had not agreed to this. He had not surrendered Ethiopia's independence. To Menelik, this was deception. To Italy, it was legal justification. Menelik responded carefully. At first, he attempted diplomacy. He wrote letters to European rulers. He made it clear that Ethiopia had never accepted protectorate status. Some European governments listened. Others did not care. Colonial ambition outweighed justice. Italy refused to revise its position. Instead, it doubled down. Italian officials insisted the treaty was binding. They claimed Ethiopia was legally subordinate. They began acting as though Ethiopia already belonged to them. Menelik had a choice: accept humiliation or resist. He chose resistance. In 1893, Emperor Menelik II formally repudiated the Treaty of Wuchale. He declared the treaty null and void. This was an extraordinary act. No African ruler had openly rejected a European treaty in this way. Menelik's message was clear. Ethiopia would not be a protectorate. It would not surrender its sovereignty. Italy reacted with outrage. In Rome, politicians denounced Menelik. The press called for military action. The treaty, they claimed, had been violated. War, they argued, was now justified. Italian forces in Eritrea began preparing for invasion. Forts were reinforced. Troops were moved south. Supply depots expanded. At the same time, Italian officials believed Ethiopia would back down. They assumed Menelik would be intimidated. They believed a show of force would be enough. They did not understand Ethiopia. Menelik did not panic. He did not rush into battle. Instead, he prepared. He accelerated arms purchases. He strengthened alliances. He issued calls to mobilize. He made it clear that Ethiopia would defend itself. The Treaty of Wuchale was no longer a diplomatic issue. It was a line in the sand. On one side stood Italy, confident, ambitious, and arrogant. On the other stood Ethiopia, united, determined, and prepared. The road to war was now unavoidable, but the coming conflict would not unfold as Italy expected. Italian planners believed the campaign would be quick. They believed Ethiopian resistance would collapse after a few defeats. They believed Adwa would be just another colonial battle. They could not have been more mistaken. In the next part, we will follow the armies as they mobilize. We will trace the march toward northern Ethiopia, and we will see how the path to Adwa was shaped not only by strategy, but by overconfidence and fatal miscalculation. By the end of 1895, the inevitability of war was clear. Italy was preparing to advance from its coastal colony in Eritrea, believing Ethiopian forces would crumble under European firepower. Menelik II, however, saw every move with clarity, precision, and patience. Ethiopia was vast, and its army was dispersed across multiple regions. Menelik issued orders to regional commanders, summoning forces from every corner of the empire. From Harar came Ras Makonnen Wolde Mikhail, bringing well-trained troops and artillery. From Tigray, Ras Mengesha Yohannes mobilized northern warriors familiar with the rugged terrain. From Wollo, Ras Mikhail led cavalry capable of rapid maneuvers across mountains. From Gojam, Negus Tekle Haymanot contributed disciplined infantry and logistical support. And from Tigray and the surrounding areas, Ras Alula and Gida coordinated veteran troops with decades of battlefield experience. This was an unprecedented mobilization. The call to arms went out to peasants and townsfolk alike. Villagers abandoned their farms, merchants brought supplies, and families provided food and transport for the army. Menelik ensured that Ethiopia's forces were not just numerous, but strategically prepared. Rifles and artillery had been imported from Europe, and ammunition stockpiles were distributed across the army. Supply lines were established, and intelligence networks scouted the paths that Italian troops were likely to take. Meanwhile, Italian forces began their march south from the ports of Eritrea. General Oreste Baratieri, the Italian commander-in-chief, believed that speed and surprise would ensure victory. Italian troops, disciplined and well-armed, moved in 3 separate columns, intending to converge on Ethiopian positions. But the Italians underestimated multiple factors. First, the terrain was unfamiliar. Mountains, valleys, and narrow passes slowed their progress and disoriented their units. Second, the Ethiopian army was far larger than Italian intelligence anticipated. And third, the morale of Ethiopian forces was unwavering. They were defending their homeland. Throughout the winter of 1895, Menelik's forces engaged in careful reconnaissance. Messengers and scouts relayed information about Italian positions, numbers, and supply lines. Menelik coordinated with his generals, ensuring that each regional force understood its role in the upcoming battle. On the Italian side, overconfidence clouded judgment. Baratieri believed that his artillery would dominate the battlefield and that Ethiopian forces could be fragmented and defeated in detail. He failed to account for the cohesion of Menelik's army, nor the tactical advantage provided by high ground and intimate knowledge of the terrain. By the end of February 1896, both armies were approaching the critical region around the town of Adwa. Ethiopia's forces occupied the highlands, carefully positioning troops to control strategic passes and valleys. They prepared to use the mountains not only to defend, but to encircle and crush the invader. Italian columns advanced into the Ethiopian interior, unaware of the true size and readiness of Menelik's army. Some units marched in isolation, separated by distance and confusion. Supply lines were overstretched. Communication between columns was slow and unreliable. Menelik, however, did not act impulsively. He waited. He coordinated movements. He calculated exactly when and where his army would strike. The final days of February 1896 were tense. Troops were positioned, scouts were reporting, and Menelik reviewed his plans with his trusted generals. He knew the Italians were confident, even arrogant. He knew that once the Italian columns advanced into the mountainous terrain, their mistakes would be exposed. By the end of February, the stage was set. 2 massive armies, one European and one African, faced each other in the rugged highlands of northern Ethiopia. The Italians, confident and well-armed, believed they were marching toward a swift victory. The Ethiopians, united and disciplined, were prepared to turn the tables on history.
The march toward Adwa was not a simple advance. It was a deliberate movement designed to lure the Italians into a trap where their technology, numbers, and training would be neutralized by terrain, strategy, and sheer determination. Every column, every troop movement, every logistical preparation mattered. And when the armies finally clashed on the first day of March 1896, it would be a culmination of months of preparation, intelligence, and leadership.
The night of February 29th, 1896, was tense and foreboding. Under the cold Ethiopian sky, two armies prepared for the confrontation that would decide the fate of a nation. Italian troops, confident and disciplined, camped in unfamiliar territory. They believed that a swift dawn attack would allow them to crush the Ethiopian forces before they could fully assemble. General Oreste Baratieri issued orders to move under cover of darkness, planning to surprise the Ethiopian army. But the Italians had made critical errors. They underestimated the complexity of the terrain. Mountains loomed, valleys narrowed, and the highlands were riddled with hidden paths. The separation of Italian columns meant to facilitate rapid movement, instead sowed confusion. Communication lines were fragile, and coordination was almost impossible in the dark. Meanwhile, Menelik II and his generals were awake. They had anticipated Italian overconfidence. Scouts reported the enemy's positions, column movements, and approximate numbers. Every piece of intelligence was carefully evaluated. Ethiopian commanders issued instructions to their regional forces. Troops were told exactly where to position themselves for maximum advantage. Artillery was placed on ridges overlooking valleys where Italian troops would march. Cavalry units were ready to flank and encircle. Infantry held strategic passes prepared to cut off escape routes. The Italians, meanwhile, moved cautiously, but they were already late. Night marches in mountainous terrain slowed progress. Troops became fatigued. Some units lost direction. The element of surprise which Baratieri had hoped to exploit began to vanish. Italian officers underestimated Ethiopian unity. They assumed that regional forces would act independently, failing to coordinate under Menelik's command. In reality, Menelik's generals communicated effectively. Each regional army understood its role, forming a cohesive force ready to strike at the right moment. Food and water were scarce for the Italians. The Ethiopian highlands offered no easy supply lines for an invading army. Menelik had prepared for this, ensuring that his forces were well provisioned. Italian soldiers, unfamiliar with the terrain, would soon face exhaustion alongside the enemy's discipline. Italian arrogance further compounded their errors. Reports of Ethiopian forces were dismissed as exaggerated. Baratieri believed that the modern rifles, superior training, and artillery of his troops would guarantee victory. He failed to account for the intelligence, numbers, and morale of the Ethiopian army. The night before battle was quiet, but the tension was palpable. Menelik convened his generals in secret councils. Plans were reviewed. Troop movements were confirmed. Every ridge, valley, and pass was accounted for. Meanwhile, Italian soldiers, confident in their European superiority, prepared for what they thought would be an easy victory. Their columns would advance at dawn, separated and vulnerable. Unknown to them, every misstep, every delay, every overconfident assumption had been anticipated by Menelik. The stage was set. The dawn of March 1st, 1896 would bring one of the most decisive and surprising battles in history. The Italians, disciplined but isolated, would face an Ethiopian army prepared not only in numbers and weapons, but in strategy, terrain mastery, and unity of purpose. The night passed slowly. Menelik slept little. He knew that the next day would determine not just a battle, but the fate of an empire, and a message to the world that Africa could defend its sovereignty.
At sunrise, the mountains and valleys around Adwa would erupt in one of the most dramatic confrontations of the 19th century. A confrontation that would overturn assumptions, shock Europe, and inspire generations across Africa.
At dawn on March 1st, 1896, the mountains and valleys around Adwa trembled with the movements of two great armies. Italian columns, confident but overextended, advanced into the highlands. They believed their rifles, artillery, and training would dominate the battlefield. They were about to discover that terrain, numbers, and determination could outweigh even the most modern weaponry. From the northern passes, Ethiopian scouts reported Italian positions back to Emperor Menelik II and his generals. Menelik, calm and deliberate, gave the signal. Ethiopia's forces, drawn from every corner of the empire, moved into strategic positions. The Ethiopian army was massive. Estimates range from 73,000 to over 100,000 troops, far surpassing the Italian expeditionary force of roughly 17,000. Menelik had planned the engagement carefully. Rifles, artillery, cavalry, and infantry were positioned to strike the Italians simultaneously from multiple directions. By mid-morning, the Italian columns began to converge near the Ethiopian center. General Matteo Albertone's column, moving along the western approach, became the first to encounter heavy resistance. Ethiopian infantry poured fire from concealed positions on the high ground. Cavalry units circled Albertone's flanks, cutting off retreat routes. Artillery from elevated ridges rained destruction down onto the Italian positions. Albertone's forces were trapped. Confused, outnumbered, and fatigued, the Italian soldiers fought desperately, but they could not hold the lines. Menelik's generals exploited every weakness, coordinating attacks to maximize pressure on isolated columns. On the Eastern Front, General Giuseppe Arimondi faced a similar fate. Ethiopian warriors surged through valleys and passes, taking advantage of every slope, ridge, and narrow pathway. Arimondi was killed in action, a blow that further demoralized Italian forces. Disorganization spread rapidly through the Italian ranks. Meanwhile, General Vittorio da Bormida attempted to rally his troops. He fought bravely, but the numbers and coordination of Ethiopian forces were overwhelming. Italian units became isolated, artillery became ineffective, and communication between columns broke down entirely. By late morning, the battle reached its peak intensity. Ethiopian forces encircled the remaining Italian troops. Menelik's army, disciplined yet ferocious, struck from all sides. Rifles cracked, cannons roared, and the highlands became a maelstrom of smoke, dust, and chaos. The Italian army, despite superior technology, could not recover. Morale collapsed. Troops surrendered or were cut down. Thousands of Italian soldiers were killed or captured. The dream of an easy colonial victory evaporated in the mountains of Adwa. Ethiopian forces, on the other hand, celebrated strategic and tactical mastery. They had used the terrain perfectly, coordinated massive numbers, and executed a complex plan with precision. Menelik II's leadership had transformed a diverse regional force into an overwhelming, unified army capable of defeating a European power. By midday, the battle was effectively over. Italy had suffered its most humiliating defeat in Africa. Its officers were dead, captured, or in retreat. Its columns lay scattered, their plans destroyed. The victory at Adwa was not only a military triumph, but a symbolic one. An African army had defeated a European colonial power in one day. The world watched in shock. Italy, confident and arrogant, had underestimated the intelligence, preparation, and unity of the Ethiopian Empire. Menelik II and his generals had done more than defend their homeland. They had proven that Africa could resist colonial domination.
they had rewritten history. The Battle of Adwa became a symbol of courage, strategy, and sovereignty. It inspired not only Ethiopians, but the African diaspora worldwide. In one day, a lesson was taught that would resonate for generations. Unity, preparation, and determination could defeat even the most powerful invader. As the sun set over the highlands of Adwa, the Ethiopian army stood victorious. The mountains, once silent, now echoed with the triumph of a free people defending their homeland. Italy was forced to retreat, humiliated and defeated. Ethiopia's independence was preserved, and the legacy of the Battle of Adwa was cemented in history.
The sun had set over the mountains of Adwa, but the impact of the battle would resonate far beyond the Ethiopian highlands. Italy, defeated and humiliated, was forced to acknowledge a bitter truth. Its ambitions in Ethiopia had failed. The Italian government negotiated the Treaty of Addis Ababa in October 1896, officially recognizing Ethiopia's independence. The very empire that had underestimated Menelik's leadership and the courage of his army had to accept that a free African nation could resist European colonial domination. For Ethiopia, the victory was profound. It preserved centuries of sovereignty, culture, and traditions. It strengthened national identity and unity, demonstrating the power of a coordinated, disciplined, and determined people defending their homeland. But the significance of Adwa extended beyond Ethiopia's borders. Across Africa, the victory became a symbol of hope. It showed that colonization was not inevitable. It inspired resistance movements and offered a model for defending sovereignty against powerful invaders. The African diaspora also drew strength from Adwa. From the Caribbean to the Americas, people of African descent celebrated Ethiopia's triumph as evidence that Africa could assert itself in a world dominated by European powers. Adwa became a rallying point for pride, self-determination, and dignity. In Italy, the defeat prompted national reflection and shame. The loss fueled political turmoil and military re-evaluation. Italian newspapers tried to downplay the magnitude of the defeat, but there was no hiding the truth. Europe's assumptions about African inferiority had been decisively challenged. Ethiopia, meanwhile, began a period of consolidation. Menelik II continued to modernize the army. He strengthened infrastructure and reinforced diplomatic ties with foreign powers. Yet the memory of Adwa remained central to Ethiopian identity, a reminder that unity and strategy could triumph against seemingly insurmountable odds. Historians view the Battle of Adwa not just as a military event, but as a pivotal moment in African history. It shattered myths of European invincibility, altered colonial ambitions, and reinforced the principle that sovereignty is not granted, it is defended. Today, Adwa is remembered every year on March 2nd as Victory of Adwa Day in Ethiopia. Monuments, ceremonies, and education keep the memory alive for new generations. The battle's legacy endures in international discussions of colonial history, African resistance, and global diplomacy. In a single day, the mountains of Adwa echoed with the defiance of a free people. A European army, confident and well-equipped, was shattered. A sovereign nation preserved its independence, and a message traveled across continents. Africa could stand, could resist, and could win. The story of Adwa is not only history, it is a lesson, a symbol, and an inspiration. It is proof that determination, strategy, and unity can change the course of nations in one day, in one battle, and in one remarkable moment in history. The mountains remain, the memory endures, and the victory at Adwa continues to inspire all who value freedom and sovereignty.